Hello, in this video I make a precision platformer, but it's centered around bugs. Also, I'm making this from scratch using only vanilla web development languages. This project started as a procrastination excuse since I didn't really want to work on the 3D render I said I'd make in my last video. I started making a simple collision system since the last one I made was kind of bad. While making collisions between the character's head and the bottom of blocks, I accidentally made a bug where when you held jump and hit your head on a block, you stuck there. Then when you went to the edge of the block, you could jump up. The reason this happened is because when you hit your head, I set the Y velocity back to 0 to make you go back down. If you don't have this, the character just sits there for a bit as their velocity from the jump wears off. The problem with my solution was that the way I sensed if you're able to jump is by detecting if your Y velocity was 0. This would mean that you're on the ground, but it also means that when you hit your head, it lets you jump another time and another time, effectively sticking you to the ceiling. This was a very fun bug and allowed for a lot of parkour mechanics, so I kept it as a feature. I continued playing around with this a little more by adding the ability to create platforms and remove them. While playing around and making maps, I thought of the idea of making this into a video and maybe making it a precision platformer puzzle game with different levels you had to figure out. I was partly inspired by Ultimate Chicken Horse since I'd been playing that a lot recently. But as I messed around with the features more, I discovered more small bugs that allowed for cool maneuvers. For example, if you jump down onto the side of some platforms while holding up, instead of sticking to the bottom, you kind of do a wall jump on the side. This lets you get to lower platforms you wouldn't be able to reach. I also discovered that you can push your way through small bumps in some situations. This lets you get into some spots but then not be able to get out again. It also lets you make one-way elevators. I wanted to keep these bugs, so I had the idea to make the mechanics in the game revolve around bugs that the user can discover. It would also make this more of a puzzle game, since you have to discover new techniques to reach different parts of levels. A goal I have for making this project is that I'm not allowed to make any purposeful bugs. All the bugs that will be included in the game will be accidental bugs that were made while coding and ended up being cool. My goals for this video are to add a way to download and upload levels you've made, not to the cloud but just to and from your computer. I might, however, make a Discord server so people can upload their creations if people like this project enough. You can request that in the comments. I'll also add sprites and animations for the player and platforms if that works, different types of platforms and obstacles like spikes and crumbling platforms, a menu and level selector, a way to finish the levels, and more mechanics in general. First, I'll add a way to download and upload files to your computer, since right now I just have comments with the data for the platforms. I've made this before on another project, so I think I can mostly just copy the code into here. And now I will do just that. Downloading and uploading levels has now been made, and I added a little menu for it. You can download the data of the platforms as a text file, and then load any file with the correct format. I made this while on vacation, and since I couldn't record, I also made the next features, which I will now mention. The next thing that I added to this project is sprites for the character and a way of rendering sprites onto the platforms. First, I made the basic character, who I call Slab, and I made an idle animation for him. The blinking was my brother's idea. Second, I attempted making a sideways walking animation, but I couldn't decide on how Slab would look from the side, so I just made him face forward and moved his feet in a walking cycle. I repeated this, but for reverse in the other direction. Next, I made a sprite for Slab hanging from platforms and made his feet dangle as he hung. Then I added Slab as an image where the player would be, and I changed which GIF showed up depending on the conditions for each animation. If Slab's velocity is 0 and he is colliding with the bottom of a platform, I know that the player is holding up and hanging to the bottom, so I display the hanging animation. And if the player is walking, I display the walking animation based on which direction he is going. Now Slab is in the game, and I think he looks a lot better than the box we had before. Next, for the platforms, I was trying to think of a way to put a sprite on each platform without it being stretched or having seams when platforms overlap. I came up with an idea with my brother, which is having one image that only shows up when a platform is covering it. This would make platforms that overlap show the exact same thing. The way I did this was by having a background image that was always there, and then having each platform be a mask for the image so only the parts of the image covered by platforms would show up. By testing this with a stock image of dirt, we can tell that it works well, besides the part that shows it's a stock image. We haven't made a sprite for the platforms yet, so I will do that now. The sprite is done. I made a repeating pattern that's kind of like the Minecraft cobblestone texture, and just repeated that as the background image for the platforms. I think it looks pretty good except for the contrast with the white background, but that's the next thing I'm going to change. Now, as mentioned before, it's time to design a background for the game. I didn't really know what I wanted to make for a background, but I decided that it was going to be a mountain since you're climbing up rocks. The only idea that made sense to me was to have floating boulders around the mountain, which would explain why you're just climbing around on floating pieces of rock with a disconnected mountain in the background. I got a reference image of Mount Everest and put that in the background to just see the basic shape of a mountain, and I modeled one around it. I only recorded the outline of it because if I recorded the whole thing it would be really long, so here's the final result. I went through multiple iterations of the background color because when I actually put it in the background of the game, it clashed with the color of the character. I ended up making it very dark, and I think it looks good with slab now. Also, beware that I am not very good at pixel art, so if it looks bad, tell me politely in the comments. The next things I will add are the finish to the level and the different types of platforms. I was thinking of having the finish be a flag that you place down when making the level, but I think I'll actually have it work more like an area where you drag to create the area, and when you enter, you finish. This is better because it allows for more options, like having multiple finishes or a large area to finish, and it goes with my current system of creating platforms. For the different types of platforms, I will add a crumbling variant, where when you step on it, it crumbles after a few seconds, a dangerous variant that kills you when you touch it, and a variant that you cannot hang on to give the creator of the level more control over where the player can go. I will now code these and make the pixel art for them.
I say M-O, M-O-P, M-O-P-P, mop, M-O-P-P, mop, 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 R. I say R-A, R-A-G, R-A-G-G, rag, R-A-G-G, M-O-P-P, rag, mop, do-do-da-da-da.
The textures are now finished, and I think they work pretty well for the game. The first texture I showed is just a slightly transparent checkerboard. Its design was based off of the classic finish flags. It's very simple, but it shows clearly enough where the finish section is. The next texture is for the material that you won't be able to cling onto. I had trouble thinking of what it would look like for a while, and I wanted it to be vaguely mountain or volcano themed to match the background. First, I thought it might be something smooth like obsidian, which would be hard to get a grip on, but I just couldn't design a good-looking obsidian texture. Next, I thought of magma, which would hurt to grab onto, but I didn't want it to be confused with the material that kills the player. But then, after a week of procrastination, I guess I forgot about that worry, so I made it magma anyway. My logic behind this is that, as you can easily and clearly see, the player has pixels on the bottom of his feet, which are obviously calluses to protect from the heat of the magma. But if you look at his hands, there are no calluses. This means his feet can take the heat, but his hands can't. The next texture is for the thing that kills the player. The logical choice for this, of course, is thorny vines. We all know from years of playing rock, vine, scissors that vines kill rocks. Lastly, I made the texture for the crumbling material. I had trouble thinking of this one as well, but then settled on a glass texture. I drew the basic texture as a glass material that is split up into triangle-like pieces, and then for the frames of the animation, I just slowly shrank each section of the glass to give it a breaking effect. I tried out the first non-broken texture, and it ended up looking really good in-game, but I encountered an issue when trying to export the breaking animation. I was going to export it as a GIF that I could switch the texture to when it started breaking, but then I found out that GIFs only support fully transparent or fully opaque pixels, but nothing in between. This meant that my texture would just look like a weird gray blob when I exported it. The only way to get around this was to change the matte setting. This setting meant that when exporting a GIF, you could import a color, and it would export each frame pretending like that color was behind the texture. I used the color of the background of my game for this, and it mostly worked, except that it ruined the illusion of transparency when the material overlapped with the mountain. The only workaround that I could think of was to have each frame of the breaking animation be exported as a separate PNG, and then manually code a system to switch between the PNGs to mimic a GIF. Even if I did go to the effort of coding that, it would most likely not work, since I need to rely on the timings having no fluctuation, and on the images loading quickly enough to not make the texture flicker. This was an issue in my bouncing game, even though it only switched between two textures. But, after looking at the texture again, I realized that it just looked like an opaque glass like obsidian, which matched the theme anyway. I also created this texture when I was trying out something like pumice for the crumbling material, and it looks pretty cool. Now the only things left to do are to create the level selector and add all the new types of platforms with their functionalities to the game. I'll do these all in one time lapse since I want to get this video out soon and I'm also running out of songs. Actually, I'm sorry, the project is now finished and I've added a few other things besides the ones that I said. First, I added different types of platforms which do what I said they would do. I think they make the game look a lot better, and they also make some things like blocking off certain parts of the map easier. To switch between platform types, you can either use the number keys or the Matman menu in the side menu. There is also now a death screen and a win screen with death and win messages. I also added a main menu which has the level selector that I talked about, the editor which is the version of the game I've been showing you where you can create and delete platforms, and an information section. The information section contains the controls for the game, which you should read since I didn't mention some here, how the basic gameplay works, how the editor works, and explanations of technical things that could help you solve the levels. If you are stuck on a level or want to learn more about how to create your own levels, I would recommend reading some of the technical stuff section because it has information on a lot of bugs that would be hard to figure out if you didn't know how the code worked. In the level selector, the levels are supposed to start out easy and get harder, but I'm not very good at making easy levels, so you might get stuck on the third one, unless you read the information section. I did try to make the jumps in the beginning easy-ish and block off some misleading routes, however. Lastly, I added a few quality of life features to help make levels in the editor. First, there is now a red box in the editor that you're able to drag around. This is where the character spawns at the beginning of the level, and the spawn point's position is also saved in the level data. Secondly, I added a way to cancel creating or deleting a platform by pressing escape, because sometimes I would right-click accidentally and have to delete the platform I clicked on. Thirdly, if you press P, the game will pause. You can also press P while in the win or death screen in case you accidentally place vines or the flag over Slab's spawn point. Fourthly, there's a reset button in the side menu. This resets the whole level, including the platforms and Slab's spawn position. Fifthly and lastly, I changed the color of the side menu to be less saturated because it slightly hurts my eyes. Also, join the Discord server. Not only does it have fun stuff like counting numbers, but it also has a section for this project where you can provide suggestions, post the levels you create, and find other community levels. The first 10 viewers to join get the early pig rank, which lets you make polls. If I find some cool levels there, I could also add them to the level selector screen. That is all for now. The game will be on my website, linked in the description. Thanks for all the support on my last video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, and goodbye. If Slab's velocity is 0, if Slab's velocity is, oh my gosh.